Hello everyone, my name is Cindy and I'm going to talk to you briefly today about the history of radium pollution in Orange, New Jersey. The main purpose of next several slides is to characterize the radium extraction company, U.S. Radium Corporation, from 1917 to 1926 and its remaining impact, and to examine the exposure and health effects that workers were subject to when producing luminous paints with radium. Here's a general overview of the table of contents that will be discussed today in this presentation. We will start by going over the average annual amount of exposure of radium and the sources of radium, then move on to the history of radium extraction facilities, following with the rates of cancer among the workers at the facilities because of exposure to radium. Then we'll dive into the concentration of radium in service soil and nearby area after several years, and the total lifetime cancer incidence rates of 3 radium isotopes in groundwaters in New Jersey today. And we'll finish with a quick summary. The first figure is a pie chart of radiation sources that people might get in touch with. During everyday life, we're exposed to a variety of different types of natural radiation that is in contrast to our obligatory exposure to man-made radiation, such as exposure to medical source of radiation, diagnostic radiology, nuclear medicine, and radiotherapy. In the US, the average annual amount of radiation exposure would be 360 to 620 milligram per person. From the pie chart, we can tell that radium gas, a decay product of radium, took 55% of most radiation exposures. Radium is the #1 cause of lung cancer among non-smokers, according to the EPA estimates. It is responsible for 21,000 lung cancer deaths every year. From this, we can tell how serious the health impact of radium is. The second figure is a map of U.S. Radium Corporation, a national priority list site located in Orange, New Jersey. During the early 19th, carnonite ore was processed to yield radium, which was used for medical purpose, as well as to manufacture luminous paints for instrument and watch dials. From about 1915 through 1926, the U.S. Radium Corporation extracted radium from carnonite ore at the facility located at High and Alden Street in Orange. Approximately 0.5 to 2 tons of carnonite ore were processed each day for the 11 years the plant operated. The property is considered to constitute public health hazard due to the risk to human health, which result from exposure to ionizing radiation, which emanates from radiologically contaminated soil, structural material, and indoor radium gas. The third figure is a line graph of the rates of cancer among the women who worked as a diode painter at the U.S. Radium Corporation plant in Orange, New Jersey. Now let me introduce the backstory first. U.S. Radium Corporation marketed their luminous paint under the brand name On Dark. It was a blend mix of glue, water, and a radium powder that was applied by a diode printer to watch face, among other products used. The key ingredients was approximately 1 million times more active than uranium. The luminous material was furnished to each diode painter in small tubes, 1 to 2 grams each, one at a time. The mixture ordinarily got on hands when mixing it. Initially, the painter's fine brush was rinsed in a glass of water and then pointed into the mouth. However, the water was soon taken away as the company felt it was wasting too much material. At peak, production was nearly 55,200 diodes per year per diode painter. Some of the early diode painters ingest very large quantity of radium. Until 1920, the diode painters were allowed to eat at their workstation without washing their hands. For fun, the young women would paint their nails, teeth, and face with the paints. The diode painter and other workers were aware of their deteriorating health condition as early as 1917. Years of working in the factory that every surface inside the building sparkled with the radioluminescence make those diode painters has a radiation in their skeleton. According to statistics of bone cancer accounts for less than 0.2% of all cancers. According to the graph, diode painter who had 10-grade radiation dose had 22.97% of them got cancer, and people who had 30-grade radiation dose had 38.37% of them had bone cancer. And for people who worked for U.S. Radium for long times and had a 100-grade radiation dose, 44.47% of them had bone cancer. The fourth figure is analysis of radium contamination in the surface soil at High and Alden Street property, the location of the largest factory of U.S. Radium Corporation in New Jersey, where workers paint diodes. Waste from this plant was disposed of on and off the facility properties, contaminating the site and nearby properties with radium-226 that emits ionizing radiation and decays into radium gas. When people are directly exposed to radiation, inhale radioactive dust particles, or inadvertently ingest radioactive particles, that they may suffer adverse health effects in the form of an increased risk of certain types of cancer. Houses were later built on or near radium waste disposal areas. Some of the radium-contaminated soil was used as a fill in the low-lying areas, and some were mixed with cement for sidewalks and foundations. In the early 1980s, EPA and the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection began investigating former U.S. Radium Corporation. After immediate action to protect human health and the environment and the site investigations, EPA placed the site on the Superfund Program's National Priority List in September 1983. In 1994, about 15 years after the U.S. radiation stopped operating, the concentration of radium contamination in the surface soil at the area was still extremely high. For example, the radium level at building BH30 was about 1800 picocuries per liter. Even the soil under the street contains 1500 pico per liter radium. The fifth figure is a table of total lifetime cancer incidence risk of the three radium isotopes in groundwater in New Jersey in recent years. Radium is classified by US EPA as a Group A carcinogens because exposure to radium-224, 226, and 228 is associated with bone cancer. Exposure to each of the three radium isotopes has a different risk factor associated with it, as expressed by the total lifetime cancer incidence risk of 1 picocurie per liter of air water meet the 1 times 10 to the negative 6 goal of the 1983 amendments. They are consistent with US EPA's acceptable risk range of radionuclides in air, water, soil. So quick summary slides, we learned that exposure to radium over a period of many years may result in an increased risk of cancer, particularly lung and bone cancer. And the origin of the high radium concentration level in Orange, New Jersey, was the radium processing facilities, U.S. Radiation Corporation. Potential road exposure would be through the soil and the structural material, or the inhalation of emitter of radiation in contaminated dust or air. As a result, EPA placed the site on the Superfund Program National Priority List in 1983, then completed a broad remedial investigation and feasibility study between 1989 and 1993 to assess the nature and the extent of the contamination. And here's a reference.